In this episode, I have a conversation with Noah LaRoe from Piedmont Chapel, a church plant that's just celebrated its 10th anniversary, as we discuss how to lead a new church that's built to last. Welcome to another episode of Church Leadership Lab, the podcast that is dedicated to conversations that empower healthy churches. My name is Kendall Connor, and I'm thankful to be with you today for another episode. And in our time together, we get to do something that I think is truly special. My own church, Piedmont Chapel in High Point, North Carolina, it just celebrated its 10th anniversary, which is a huge milestone for a church plant. I've been a part of this ministry from the very beginning, and I've had the privilege of serving alongside a great friend and a leader for that time. It's our lead pastor, Noah LaRoe. And so today we're going to jump into a conversation that I had with Pastor Noah, and we're going to talk about all things church planning, how to recruit volunteers, work with small, limited budgets, and even have a big vision and share it with others. And I know those are all things that church leaders deal with, no matter what size or age your church is, whether you've been around for 100 years or you're a new church plant. We have a great conversation really about how to carry vision, how to stay flexible and resilient in all that you do. And he just brings so much wisdom to that. And plus, we're really great friends. We've been doing this thing together for over 10 years, serving in ministry. And so I know that we had a lot of fun having this conversation, and I know you're going to enjoy listening to it. As I mentioned, Pastor Noah, he is from Piedmont Chapel in North Carolina. He is passionate. He's a dedicated leader, hailing all the way from Adrian, Michigan. And together with his wife, Kristen, they made the move to the Piedmont Triad in 2013 with a team of 8 families, my family being one of those, to start a brand new church. And so they are proud parents of 3 beautiful children. And I just know that this guy, he is passionate about serving the community, mentoring and building people up. He's always pushing to improve in every area of his life. And he's just such a great leader. He likes, in his spare time, he likes to play basketball and golf. He's a huge college football fan, and he regularly runs Spartan races. And so I just know that you're going to be able to get so much motivation from him. I'm excited to share this conversation with you. So without further ado, here is my chat with my pastor and longtime friend in ministry, Noah LaRoe. Well, hey, Noah, it's so good to have you on the Church Leadership Lab podcast. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing awesome, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. I mean, it's not every day, right, that you get to interview your own pastor, someone you've been working with in ministry for so long. So this is pretty special, right?
I'm excited to do it, man. It's really cool. Yeah, we go back years.
That's right, years.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think of when we first connected. Right, it would have been back in maybe 2007, 2008, something like that.
Yep.
Does that sound right? Yeah. So it's been a while. Well, awesome. Well, look, we'll jump straight into it. One of the first things that we always like to ask everybody who comes on the podcast is what's something that doesn't necessarily make the public bio, but that all your friends and family would know about you.
I think this one's pretty clear if you know me. I'm a huge Michigan football fan, and we are currently the national champions. So until that changes, we are going to stand on that for quite a while. So it was an exciting season last year.
This was true to you, because I 100% knew that this is exactly how you would answer this question. But go on.
Yeah. Another thing, kind of fun fact. I love fitness and exercise and things like that. And I built a home gym during COVID. So one of my side hobbies would be buying and selling weights on Facebook. So I built a home gym for free during COVID. It was a lot of fun. Use it every day now. So what you're saying is you basically have Planet Fitness at your house, right? Yeah, it's at the house. It's a good spot.
I love it. Those are very, very true to you. Well, we have been able to serve in ministry with each other for quite some time. Our church, Piedmont Chapel, just celebrated its 10th anniversary, just turned 10, which is a pretty big deal. And so tell us a little bit about the church, where you're the lead pastor. And tell us, where is it located? What's, what makes Piedmont so special from your point of view?
Yeah, so we are located in High Point, North Carolina. It's amazing. It's Tar Heel country is what they call it down here. But it's a great spot. We're located in the Piedmont Triad, so it's Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem area. As you just mentioned, we're 10 years old, and we moved here just over 11 years ago. Your family, my family, to help start the church. It's been an incredible journey. As far as the church goes, though, it's a very vibrant, I'd say dynamic, very diverse church. We meet in a high school currently, and so we are on that set up and pack up grind every single week. We're an amazing team. You walk in, you don't know what the HVAC is going to be like each week, but it is powerful. It's a super welcoming, great, loving, joyful community. And so we love being a part of it. I love that we get to raise our kids in that environment. So it's been a lot of fun so far.
No, I love that. And, my family being a part of this church from the very beginning, we've seen so many of the early things, the good, the bad, and the ugly that comes from, like you mentioned, with setting up in a high school and different things like that. But overall, I know that this conversation is going to be able to help a lot of church planners, maybe who are people who are new in their journey, who haven't even made it to that 10-year mark yet, or maybe are getting ready to start a plan. And so that's why I wanted to be able to have this conversation today. Being in that lead pastor role, tell us a little bit about, what is that like? Maybe there's some people listening today who are getting ready to jump into a church plan, who are taking on that lead pastor role for the first time. Share a little bit about that if you can.
Yeah, to kind of give some context as well, if I can. You and I were both part of the original team that helped start the church. I was in the executive pastor role for the first 7 or 8 years. And so I've been in this role now for a couple of years, but have seen it since the very beginning.
Yeah.
And, what's unique about this role, I think, is the day-to-day change of pace. So when I was in the executive role, it's pretty consistent every day with certain tasks that I had to accomplish and things we were trying to push forward. And in this role, it can change day to day. I love it. It definitely carries a different weight than the executive pastor role did. But for me, I absolutely love it. I think the opportunity to lead God's church in our community is really special. God's opened up some doors to just connect with people in the community and just to see what he wants to happen here happen. And so for me, it does carry a little bit different weight, but I'm really enjoying it. Loving this season, preaching each and every week along with our other teaching team has been really special. But for me, what's been unique about it is to see it from both sides. And so seeing it as an executive staff member and now in this lead role, it helps me understand how things operate in different ways. And so it's been a cool journey so far, and very excited for what the future holds also.
Oh, and I mean, hats off to you. I mean, it is working in this church for so long and having a spot in. I've done so many different roles at Piedmont where I've helped out with some of the creative things. I've helped out when someone leading volunteers and things like that. It's a really special place, and getting to work with different people in different positions has been a lot of fun, right? If I can just be honest. And
the only thing that they have not asked either of us to do yet is lead worship, and that's a really good decision.
And that is a good thing.
We've probably covered every other role in the church other than that.
I think that's right. It's funny you point that out. Actually, I was getting ready to ask you, you think I could start singing? Do you think that would be any good?
Definitely not.
Probably not. Probably not.
Just they wouldn't let me either.
That's it.
Unless you have,
we have that in common. That's too funny. Well, I mean, this brings back a lot of memories, working in the different roles and things like that. I mean, looking back on the church's early days, what would you say are some of the big moments that have shaped the direction of the church? What are some of the things that you look back on that have kind of set a course for where our church is today?
Yeah, I think I would go all the way back even to 2012, back before any of us moved. And just it was a vision on a piece of paper. I was in Kentucky at the time. I think you were in Maryland at the time.
Yeah.
And just dreaming about this church that could exist in North Carolina with the sole purpose of seeing all people find new life in Christ. I remember back then just dreaming about that and having the great faith that, hey, man, this might be possible. Like we could actually see this happen. And then not just sticking there with that faith, but actually loading up our cars and moving. I can remember back then, it's crazy now, but I mean, we were paying like $600 a month for an apartment, 2 bedroom, 2 bath. Like you cannot find that
Dream
anywhere
rent prices
anymore.
at this point in the time, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, my wife and I, we got married 2 months before we moved here to help start the church. And so we didn't have a job. We had saved some money, but we really stepped out on faith. And
Wow.
I think going back to that season, that was one of the most important decisions we ever made, is to say, hey, we believe that this can happen. We believe God's calling us to it. We had a lot of confirmation along that in those early years. And we said, hey, we're just going to trust God at his word and take a step of faith. And so from there, like we got here to this area and it was like, hey, there's nothing to do now but to work towards this goal. And so we started making it happen. And so I can remember back to where we had our interest meetings at Southwest High School, which is where we currently meet on Sunday mornings. We had interest meetings back then in this location. We didn't know that's where we're going to have Sunday services in the future. And so we decided on, hey, we're going to start in a movie theater. Selfishly, I do miss the seats. Those are super comfortable. You might fall asleep a little bit during the gathering.
They smelled like popcorn at the movie theater, but the seats were way more comfortable, right?
Yeah, and you and I love movies and popcorn, so it was a great environment for us. But I can remember back when you ask about decisions that were made, it was, hey, we want to be in a place where people could be welcomed. And we knew even at the time, cost-wise, it was finding a spot that was easily visible, that had enough parking, that had a great environment, or an environment that had the space we could create what we wanted in it with pipe and drape. Our church planners will know what that is. But it was making decisions, hey, this is a location that will work for us. And as we chose it said, hey, and for some, we wanted to reach people that had not been in church in a long time, or if ever. And so for us choosing a movie theater and now choosing a school, that kind of took some of those walls down initially, so that people could step in.
Right.
And it didn't initially feel like a church, but once you walk in, you know, hey, these are God's people. These people love me. I'm welcomed here. I'm cared for. And so I think early on, it was the decision to move on faith. And then, you know, finding a great location that worked well for us.
I want to touch on that because that's so good. You mentioned in the very early days, just having the faith to step out, to move to this location as a part of this just church plan and getting started. You said you were very early in your marriage. You and Kristen had just gotten married. Tell us a little bit about what would you tell people that are maybe trying to muster up the faith to be able to take their next big step in ministry, something they feel like God's called them to do? What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've seen this happen over the course of my life. I think even getting to the place, so I'm from Michigan originally, but where we originally met was in Baltimore, Maryland. So even taking the step of faith to move there, to go to ministry school, and then from there to move to Kentucky on faith, no family there, and move into the mountains of southeastern Kentucky, a beautiful area that I lived in for almost 5 years, which was where I met my wife. And then from there it was like, hey, it's another step. And so I would, if I were encouraging someone right now that is trying to make the decision as to whether or not they should start this or so they should move forward with what God's calling them to do, I'd encourage them to look back to the times when he called them in the past and where he's already shown himself faithful. Because what I've realized over the years is that it builds over time. He doesn't ask you like Abram to go and to leave everything initially and doesn't give you any details at all. Usually has a little bit more context and location to it. But for some people, maybe you are being called to go somewhere and you don't even have the address yet. But for the majority of us, he's gonna increase those steps before he asks us to take a big step of faith. And so I would encourage you, look back and see where he's already been faithful when he's called you and you were obedient. And as you get ready to take this move, for me personally, it was a move again, but for my wife, it was actually a bigger step of faith because she had never lived anywhere else. She had lived in that place in Kentucky for her entire life. And so I'm the crazy guy that had moved there, was a youth pastor, talked her into marrying me because I definitely married up. And when our very first date, just to let you guys know, I don't recommend doing this. So I'm going to tell my daughters, don't do this. But our very first date, we weren't actually dating yet. I said, hey, I'm really praying about moving to go help be a part of this church. And I would love for you to come with me. And if you could pray about this. And so miraculously, she said yes over time to that. We started dating first, then we got married, then we moved. But I can remember just watching her go through that journey as a big faith step, moving from her family for the first time. For me, it was a little bit easier, but it was still saying, hey, even though we're early on in our marriage, we're going to say, God, you're calling us to do this, and our responsibility is to be obedient to you. And so we just took the first step, and it's amazing to see what God has done. And as you know me really well, I'm very practical. So we did save money. We did have an apartment that we're going to go to. We made a couple trips to check out the area. So there was some wisdom involved as well. But for us, it was saying, hey, if you're calling us to do this, then we would be disobedient at this point to say no. And so it's been amazing to see his blessing on that simple step of obedience.
It's amazing. And what's pure transparency going into a relationship is, hey, I have a dream. I feel called that we're going to one day go and be a part of a church plant. What
I
transparency there?
Fine dining restaurant. It was Applebee's. We had to drive over the mountain to Virginia to even get there.
Some great conversations about ministry can happen at Applebee's, right? I love it. You also had mentioned that we've bounced around from some different locations. We're currently meeting in a high school, right? But we've also been around to some other locations. What advice would you give, and some practical wisdom on locations like that when you're trying to figure that out for your church plant?
Yeah, I think there are some lists, and I'm sure you guys have some resources that you could provide with that, and certain things that you look for. But if there's anything I've learned about it, it's being open to what is out there, and also being a little bit picky too. You and I both care about aesthetics a lot. We care about the excellence side of things, and so for us, we moved. And just to give people some context, we moved from the high school, from the movie theater to the high school about 2.5 years in, and we actually moved cities doing that. And then we'd actually started a second location back in Greensboro again in the fall of 2019, and then COVID happened. And so we're 2 portable locations. COVID happens, and we ended up going online because the school would not allow us to meet. And so went online for, I believe it was around 5 or 6 months. We had a relationship with a local church that let us do 8 weeks of Sunday night church. And we learned quickly that with a lot of young families, Sunday nights aren't ideal. And so we went back online for a season and then moved into an Embassy Suites convention center. Another environment that had opportunity for stage, it had space for kids, it had great parking, and it was just kind of being flexible and resilient. So we wanted to always make sure this is a space that could speak to who we are. And so we're not necessarily going to go to a place that doesn't have the right parking, that doesn't have the right aesthetic, that doesn't have the right reputation in the community either, because most people are going to search where you're at. They're going to know the area. Some people even better than us, especially when we're here early on.
Yeah.
And so I think just taking time to ask questions. In fact, one of the locations we asked a business leader in our church, hey, do you know of anything? Any location that we could move into? And they actually kind of gave us a lead on it. So I'd say connect with some people from the area as well.
No, and you bring up a really good point too about just being resilient and just knowing that, okay, here's a church plant that's been around for 10 years. And some people from the outside may look at it where it is today and they may think, okay, well, they've had this perfect scenario the entire time. They've always had, the exact space that they wanted at the right time. But the truth is we have had to move around. We've had to change, and we had to call some audibles and things like that. And so I think that's really encouraging for the people who are watching and listening to this today, just to hear that sometimes you just have to be flexible. And you spoke to it, saying having to be resilient and just knowing God's called you to it, and just being able to press in and say, okay, well, no matter what, we're going to go and we're going to figure out something. And I think you've done that so well. And so hats off to you on that. I kind of want to.
I think
go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I would say that's one of the. I would say one of the character qualities that I encourage any church planner to have is just to be flexible, to be resilient. If you would imagine that everything's going to go exactly as you plan. I am a planner, so I have it written down. I have certain things that I want to have happen on certain timelines. And what I've realized in this journey is that it rarely happens the way that I wrote it out. There are certain things that do, and you can plan and prepare for those to happen. But many times it does not. And when you get into those situations, you have to make a decision as to whether or not you're going to keep going and pressing towards the vision that God's called you to, or if you're just going to back down. And I think if there's been one distinguishing factor for us over 10 years, it's there's nothing that can actually deter us from what God has called us to do. Wow. Yes, we cannot be allowed to meet in the school, or we might have to move because of construction going on somewhere, whatever the reason may be, but we're going to make it happen either way. And I love to see that's kind of the identity, really, not only of our city, but even now of our people. Say, hey, whatever it takes, we're going to make it happen.
I love that. And, just seeing the journey that has been, I feel like that is so true to the story of Piedmont Chapel and how everything has come about. I want to take a minute quickly and just, a lot of people who are watching, whether they're in a church plant that's been around, is brand new or been around 10 years or have a church that's been around for 100 years, a big topic that comes up a lot is volunteers. Can you speak to how we've been able to find people to help us launch the church, and then just now, 10 years in, find people to help make it happen every single Sunday?
Yeah, I've got a pretty cool story from early on. So when you move, and some of you, as Kendall just referenced, you're in the early stages, maybe you've been going for a long time. All of us are looking for the same thing, is we want to grow our teams and we want really not just to grow our teams so that the size is bigger, but we want to connect people to purpose. And if you're leading a church, you know that there's amazing purpose connected to it. And so what we did early on, I can remember moving into the city. We didn't really know many people around this area. Right. And so we would get into Starbucks. We would go to Panera Bread. We'd go like, hey, if there was an event happening in the community, we're going to show up and just look for opportunity to have conversations. Right. In those early years, naturally, a question that comes up is, hey, what do you do? That was a question we could not wait to answer. As a matter of fact, we actually moved here to help start this church. So we would create opportunities sometimes just for people to ask that question, because we wanted to share the vision that God had placed on our heart. And it actually worked really well. And to be honest, that's some of the edge that I even want to continue to have as we move past this 10-year mark and even into the future. I think there's something powerful, like the same vision exists today that existed over 10 years ago when we moved here. And we need to have that same edge and urgency about us. And I can remember back early on, our first drummer, Incredible, was with us for many years. We met him in Krispy Kreme. So he was working at the Krispy Kreme that was like right across the street from the movie theater that we were meeting in. And he was one of our most consistent team members. And he was looking for purpose. I believe, if I remember the story right, he had moved to the area for college and had not gotten connected to a local church yet. And so we had that opportunity for him to be a part of our team. And again, I can remember, as Sheldon was his name, just an incredible, solid guy that was just looking for purpose. And so I'd encourage you, don't ever say no for somebody. And some people are one question away, one connection away from stepping into God's purpose for their life, and especially in that season. And you may be the one that opens the door. As far as the other side of it, I think for us, we have a lot of team members that have been with us through those journeys, through all of those moves, a part of our team for many, many years. And I think something that's big for us is caring really well for people. We want to know them. We want to know what's going on in their life. We don't want them to be on our team just to be a number or to fill a role or just to make sure that planning center is full. But we really want to know them and care about them well. And the other thing is we celebrate. We have a culture of celebration. So we're trying to celebrate wins. Just the other day, one of the guys on our team had been praying for a job and had been interviewing. And just to watch the interaction that our team members and our leaders had with him, especially when he got to celebrate that he got that job, was really refreshing, especially when we have so many team members. Sometimes those things can slip through the cracks, but I saw team members from different places, whether it was kids or worship, just celebrating alongside him. And so having a culture where they're celebrated, because many people don't have that in their life. And I'd say really a third thing, because I just like to alliterate stuff. If we're going with these already, I think it's casting vision. I think it's not just the vision from the beginning, but the vision of what can be. And so for those that have been a part of the journey for 10 years, they've seen the ups and downs. They've seen the ins and outs. They know us better than anybody, but they also want to know what God is putting on our heart. And we look for any opportunity just to keep that vision in front of them. And I think that's what has really helped to see the longevity of team members. And to be honest, I'll be transparent. We haven't always got this right. We're still learning as we go. But I think those things really help for longevity, because we want to be with these people for a long period of time. We want to see their kids grow up. Now we're talking early on, neither of us had kids. We both have 3 kids now. They're growing up in the ministries that didn't even exist 10 years ago. And so we want that for the team members that we have currently. And so we're going to create any way we possibly can just to care really well for people and just have a great culture that builds them up. And honestly, a culture that equips them to not just be successful on our teams, but also in their workplaces. So some of our greatest celebrations are when something they've learned in
Right.
our culture, they're now applying in work, and they've got promoted into a leadership role and into a manager role. And they took the same principles that we taught as they're on our team, and they're using those now to bring life and to bring our culture into their workplace. Those are some of my favorite stories.
I love that. And really quickly, recap those three things that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I'd say the three C's would be care. It would be, of course, I'm going to forget it right now, but it's care, celebration, and casting vision are the
That's
three.
it. No, I love that. Speak a little bit to, I know that we've done some really, really interesting things in terms of outreach to our community. And this is something that we've done early on in our church all the way to just now. We've got some new exciting things. Would you tell us a little bit about how we've engaged the community and what are some ideas that maybe some other people can do right in their neighborhood?
Yeah, I think when we moved, we really did a lot of study ahead of time. And even when we first got to the city to see, hey, what are the needs here? And so once we identified the needs, the next thing that we did was we connected with ministries and really just did a deep dive into who is already, what organization, what ministry is already doing great work in that area.
Yeah.
And what we decided early on is we're not just going to reinvent the wheel all the time.
Sure.
We don't need to create 150 different ministries for all the needs that our city has, but instead, who's already doing it really well and how can we partner with them? So when it comes to like outreach and serving in the community, I'd say partnership is like the word that we go with. And we have some incredible long-term partnerships. In our area, of food insecurity was actually ranked one of the highest, which is not a good thing, in the entire country. And so seeing that need, we've partnered with a lot of organizations that actually help meet that need. And so our church not only sees that, hey, we care about our community because it's a felt need, but they also have an opportunity to be in that, making a difference themselves. And so partnership has been huge with us. And also God's opened up some pretty cool doors for me with some of the city leaders. And so I have an opportunity to just have direct conversations. I'll tell you this, no matter where you're at, if you go into a meeting with a city leader and say, hey, how can our church help you? What are the top three things what are the top three needs in this city? And let us see if we can help. We may not be able to solve every problem. We may not be able to fix everything that needs to be fixed. But I guarantee that we can add and we can be a blessing. We can add value to those areas. And so for us, I think it's the partnership and it's really knowing your city well. And now as we look ahead, it's some very strategic things that the mayor of our city has in mind and the city manager has in mind. Wow. And so for us, it's trying to get into those open doors and to say, hey, how can our church be a blessing? Because at the end of the day, it's a great question to ask, is that, and it's not original to me, but if your church ceased to exist tomorrow, would the city even notice?
Wow.
And I started thinking about that question a few years back, and the answer at that time could have been yes. I mean, we've done a lot of great work. We've been consistent for a long period of time, but the answer could be yes. And so it was like, how could we make it where that's not possible? Because when the city knows our church's name and then they know what we're about and we're all about Jesus and introducing people to him, then it truly can make a big difference. And so partnership, relationship, I think those are some of the keys for serving in our area.
And that's so good. And I love that you said, a lot of people may assume that, okay, new church, we're going to come in and we're going to have all of these ideas of what we want to do. I love that you said, okay, no, we're going to figure out, okay, what are the actual needs that are here? And we're going to ask the people who are already there working to make the city a better place. Okay, what can we do to come alongside you? That's so good.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. You got a lot of church leaders who are watching and listening to this. What advice would you give to other pastors or leaders who are just starting out in ministry or maybe just starting out with a church plant, especially when it comes to working with limited resources?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say many of us in this world feel all the time, if we have great vision, we always feel like there's limited resource to accomplish it. And I mean, I can even think of now of the list of things and the vision that I have, and we don't have the resources to accomplish it right now. But I believe that we can still make things happen. So I think it's getting creative. For me, and again, you know me really well, but I'm not really the most creative person. So I like to see what's already been done in the past or how other people have done it. And an area that God has really challenged me in to step outside of my comfort zone and to think outside of the box and to just see, hey, what is possible? Like, hey, if there's limited resource, but there's a need to be met, then there's got to be some way to fill that gap and to make that happen. And so I think it's really getting creative. I think it's also taking the pressure off of feeling like you have to do it all right now, or that you have to do it all by yourself. I think sometimes as leaders with great vision, we feel like, hey, it's on us to make this happen. And the truth is, God's never really told us to carry that weight all by ourselves. And you just never know as you think outside the box and get creative. And I would say at the end of the day, like, this is almost the assumed thing, but when you're praying about it, God can give you some great clarity. And so not neglecting that as well, because I think sometimes as we get busy, we feel like we have to go out and do the work and be physically doing something. Sometimes the greatest work we can be doing, especially early on, but all throughout our ministry seasons, is to pray and to ask God, hey, what is it that you want me to do? Who is it that you want to connect me with? Open the doors that you want to be opened. Because when we've got this great vision and it's stirring in our heart and we want to go make it happen really yesterday. Sometimes it takes years to accomplish it. Sometimes we can get a little bit antsy. And so to say, really honestly, take the weight off of your shoulders, take the pressure off, and just to walk at a consistent pace and say, hey, God, I want to do this, but I want to do this in your timing. So as you provide the resource, I'm going to step out on faith. I'm going to be obedient, but I know that you ultimately are the one that can make this happen. And so I want to walk at your pace and in the direction that you want me to go. And I think it's getting creative. I think it's partnering with people. I think it's sharing vision. You know, some people that have the resource that could make that vision happen. And so sometimes it's stepping out of your comfort zone to cast that vision, to make a specific ask. Sometimes we don't want to do that, but you'd be amazed at how many people are just looking for an opportunity to be a blessing and to make a difference. And you are the carrier of that vision. So I would say sometimes it just comes to being bold and saying, hey, I'm going to step out. I'm going to get outside of my comfort zone, which you'll hear me say that a lot. But sometimes that's the difference maker, is just saying, hey, let me get out of the familiar, out of the known, out of the current comfortable area that I live in, and say, God, all right, stretch me. Here's an opportunity. I'm going to walk through this door.
No, I love that. And it's so true. Sometimes you do just have to put yourself out there, right? You just have to believe in the vision that God has given you. I love that. That's really good. We ask this question to everyone who comes on the podcast. I want to ask you this. In your opinion, what would you say is one essential component of a healthy church?
I think it is faith. And that's going to sound very cliche. But what I have realized, even looking back, is like we had great faith moving here. We had great faith because we knew God was calling us. And then we make the move. And then sometimes you get into seasons where you're comfortable, and having great faith ends up being more dangerous as you move on. See, we didn't move like you and I know there's a lot of church planters that move with families and they're upright. Like it was just us and our wives. And, you know, we didn't have a lot to lose, to be honest. It was like, hey, why not? We're in our mid-20s. Let's go do this. And so I felt like it was easier to have faith then. Now, what God has been challenging me with, and I do think it's a distinctive of a healthy church, is to continue to walk in faith.
Right. To keep it
going. I think
sometimes
the miracles are just on the other side of a step of faith. And so I've been challenged, you know, celebrating year 10 is amazing. We're loving this season and looking back and seeing what God has done. But none of that would have ever happened if we didn't take the first step of faith. And what he's been challenging me with recently even is to say, hey, like it's going to go to another level. And I think if we're going to have healthy churches for the long term, I think it is leading with an edge of faith, because as leaders, especially, we're the ones that carry that weight. And sometimes it's like, let's just stay where we're at. And we've lived the faith life before. Let's just kind of coast now. But I don't think that honors God at all. And so I think if you're going to have really a healthy distinctive in a church, is to walk with great faith and to say, all right, God, I'm going to ask you honestly, what is that next step of faith for me? Give me the faith, increase my faith, even as the disciples prayed. And I think that is one of the things that's easy to get away from. We can just get into maintenance and management mode. And again, like I just mentioned a second, I don't think that honors God. I think big faith and bold faith honors God. And it doesn't mean to lack wisdom and to do crazy things just because we're going to call it faith. But I think it is to operate with a heart and a posture of faith, believing that God is the creator of the universe. He's called us to this, and there's nothing that is impossible for him.
That is so good and so true, right? I mean, I love that you said, okay, we had faith in the very beginning. We had I had big, bold faith to go and to move somewhere and to start this thing. But okay, 10 years in, still having faith, still being able to believe that God's going to do something big and carrying that and walking in that. It's just such a big deal. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Something that we do kind of to wrap up the last bit of this podcast is we like to do a final 5, some rapid fire questions. And so I'm gonna give you some quick ones. You have to come up with these answers kind of quickly, but are you ready for them?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. I have number 1. It should be really easy. I know that you're going to like this one. Okay. What's one book that you would recommend to church leaders?
Oh man, you're going to start off with the hard one. I have a lot of books. Man, one that I always go back to, especially in leadership role, would be Way of the Shepherd by Kevin Leman. Solid book. Small book, quick read. So that's a good one.
That's a great one. And you said it's a quick read. So that's a one that they can pick up and run with. I love that. All right. Next one coming at you fast. What is the last thing that you listened to, whether music or podcast or audiobook?
Last thing I listened to, Take the Limits Off, song by Israel Houghton. So pretty solid.
Nice.
Along with a rock playlist this morning during my workout.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's fair. All right. What is your favorite piece of technology or software? And here's a rule. You can't say your phone. Okay.
Okay. All right. I'm going to cheat then. I'm going to say my Apple Watch. I'm on a long training journey right now. So this thing is coming clutch to track everything.
Love that. Yeah, it's hard to go without an Apple Watch these days. What about this? What is a quote or some kind of advice that has really stuck with you over the years?
Man, I would say if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. Has been one.
That's a good one.
It applies a lot with vision. So.
Oh, yeah, I love that. That's really good. All right, one last final rapid fire question. What is one thing that you'd like to communicate to our audience of church leaders?
I would say you can do it. I think that God has called you to do what you are doing right now or what you're getting ready to step into. And it can easily be discouraging at times when you don't see the fruit right away. But I would say, like, you can do it. He's called you to it. He's equipped you to do it. And as you step into it, don't give up.
That's so good. Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today. I mean, I'm going to see you very shortly, right? Like we've got another Sunday coming right around the bend. I love being able to serve in our church. Thank you so much for all of your leadership. I want to take a chance to say that publicly. Thank you for coming on here, not only just for being my guest on here today, but also just for everything that you do. You do an amazing job at our church. We're so appreciative for everything that you do. You and Kristen pour into our community. We're so thankful for that.
Thank you. That means a lot, man. Appreciate the invite to come on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much again. Thank you for sharing all the wisdom, from 10 years of being in a church plant. And we really appreciate, I know that your words of telling people to kind of stay the course and, to be encouraged and that they can actually do this, that if they have a vision, if God's called them to do it, I know it's that he's going to see them through it. Right. And so thank you for sharing all of that today. For everyone who's watching and listening, thank you for taking time to be with us here today and for jumping in. We try to have these conversations to help church leaders in whatever role you may be serving in. And so thank you for being a part of it. If it was valuable to you, what we'd ask from you is to share it, to comment, leave a review, all of these ways that you can help us to get the word out to other church leaders. And so thank you for sharing and being a part of it and helping us to get this in the ears of more church leaders everywhere to help empower more healthy churches. So thank you for being here with us today. Thank you, Pastor Noah, and we will see you all next time.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple to use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.